te Māori rangi, a kai ahau te Māori tipu, a kai ahau te Māori tāwhitu, kai ahau te Māori nohia. Nō tiki o rangi, nō te waioro o tāne te waioro.
That have not spoken that want to say something. Kerry Worsnop.
Thanks. So just on page 25, just some questions around the timeline. Just noting that
aside for you to be able to allocate where you need to. We have made the call to ask to go into it to help pay for the local share for the emergency works. A lot of the works you're talking about there are ones that are waiting on this approval so that we can start the works for them. Thank you.
All in favour? Contrary, carried. Okay, we move to page 28. We have given this quite a few bites, but I will give everyone the opportunity to give it another bite. So please relax. People can speak to this and we will make decisions and then we will grab a coffee. So Councillor Dowsing, I see your hand is up. So what I'm going to do is people can speak once. So just think before you speak, and then right in the end, if they are in need, I will allow people to speak again. So Councillor Dowsing, you are first.
Thank you very much. This has obviously been a hotly debated topic, and it's been difficult on all of us to try to find a consensus. It's left me pondering how we get to a point where council as a group can be confident in our decision and making the right decision. And it feels as if, to me, it's going to fall to the Commission to make this determination for us. Essentially, we're going to go in without predicting the outcome with somewhere near a split vote or a very, very slim majority. So in the interest of trying to build consensus at council and trying to outline our concerns, I think we can potentially do something slightly different in the recommendations. Regardless of the outcome of our vote today, it will be judged on the conversation that we've had and on the and whether it meets the criteria of community of interest and the population base and all of those things that we know are legislated to meet our requirements. I've sought some advice on this, and the outcome will be determined not by our decision, but our recommendation will be judged after today. Given that that's going to be the outcome, I would propose that in an effort to try to seek consensus around this table, we consider not just making a recommendation that does include a Tairāwhiti rural ward, but also noting our concerns within that recommendation. The reason for noting the concerns is to highlight the seriousness of those concerns, the fact that we're a split council on this decision, and that it gives us an opportunity to put them foremost in the considerations of why we have those concerns. It would be something along the lines of introducing the singular Māori ward, Tairāwhiti urban ward, Tairāwhiti rural ward, and then having an additional noting recommendation that says something along the lines of notes that concerns have been raised regarding the establishment of a Tairāwhiti rural ward as a single community of interest. Due to this and other items outlined in the minutes of our deliberations, voting at large for our general electorate was considered council's preferred option. Of note, the collective rural region includes isolated rural townships, peri-urban and coastal, including both remote communities and high-value properties bordering the urban boundary. This combined population may or may not meet the definition of a community of interest. My single concern with removing rural wards is that it does not meet that definition. It's not, I cannot determine whether there will be better or worse representation because I do not know who will apply for those jobs. I do not know who will get elected. So if, and only if this gains a majority vote, a strong majority vote, I would be happy to move a recommendation that fits that. And then we can all have our deliberations, put our points forward and leave it for judgment at a later time, not by us to make that determination, but by those who set those rules. So as I say, if that gets a majority, then I'd be happy to move it. If not, we can have our deliberations and someone else can move something else.
Thank you for that, Councillor Dowsing, and we'll get back to that, James. So I thought I would just open up this discussion. I should have probably, before you spoke, and say, for someone that has been through the process 3 years ago, so James, correct me if I tell this narrative the wrong way. So what we are going to do today, and you've just started that off, is each one of us have the opportunity to say why we feel our representation model is the way to go forward. It doesn't matter what we decide today, there will be objections because we have people that feel strongly one way and people that feel strongly the other way. And that is a fantastic democracy because we have different needs and different opinions, and that's why we are here. So they then contact the commission directly and say, the Gisborne District Council seat, this is what they want us to look like in the next election. We don't agree. So people that objected to us in the process have the opportunity then to directly object to the commission. The commission will listen to this deliberation. They go through our videos and listen to see what opinions were shared and how we got to that. So I just wanted to highlight that as well. This today, and this is why I'm saying everyone will have the opportunity to speak. This will be part of their decision making. They will then, those objectors have the opportunity to then come in, and I will speak on our behalf and say, this is what council decided and this is why we decided. And then other people will come in and say, we absolutely agree or we absolutely disagree. And the commission then make a call. We've got no rights to appeal or anything. They then make the call. Is it correct, James? Everything that I've said so far?
They do make the final call if they receive objections, and they go through that hearing process. But council is required today to decide on a final proposal.
Yes.
And that will form the basis for which people can object.
Yes. Okay. So I just wanted to see that. Thank you for that. I'll get to you either. Councillor Dowsing, we will allow people to speak. We've heard of your intention and we can revisit it again. Heather.
Through you, Your Worship, there is a right of appeal. You can go to the High Court once the Local Government Commission make their determination.
Okay, thank you for that. I was not aware of that. Larry Foster, Pat Seymour.
Once we decided on STV, it was almost like a fait accompli, and I didn't vote for STV either. If first past the post got passed, maybe my view might have changed. But when you read on page 38, and I really thank the staff for the analysis that's been down, because it's actually quite really important, and it identifies in the small print underneath the way that has been worked out as well, and the numbers. And the numbers actually suit, STV system actually suits the rural ward representation as well, because the numbers don't need to be as high as what per councillor as what they would be in a first past the post election. So I'm happy to move the staff's recommendation the way it is and move forward. And I'd really encourage anybody that is interested in this to read the applying STV to the Gisborne district, and on page 38 and down, particularly the media, because it actually identifies why we should do STV, why we've got STV and why we should do at large. So I'd encourage everyone to reread it if they haven't, and vote accordingly. Thank you.
Okay, we move on to Pat Seymour and then Josh Wharehenga.
Thank you,
I'm
Madam
just
Chair.
letting everyone know that no one have to rush. We are going to break at 10 because we've got a special guest coming, and then we will have a cup of tea and carry on afterwards. So we're in no rush.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to move a different resolution, and I give notice that I will move a alternative resolution should that one fail. If we listen to the submitters, we had 1,149 submitters to our representation review process, and this council stands behind giving our public the opportunity to have a say, and we pride ourselves on giving our public to have a say. 86 people of that 1,149 supported the proposal as it was at our last meeting. 646 did not support it, and 41 did not answer, and that's contained in the agenda, which I unfortunately was looking at before. I absolutely support the Maori wards of 5, Tairāwhiti General Ward of 6, and a Tairāwhiti Rural Ward of 2. What is the purpose of local government? The purpose of local government is actually to give everyone an opportunity to be heard, to have access to a councillor, and to actually know and understand. And it gives you a breadth of skills and background around this table. It isn't about any incumbents, and none of us should think it is about incumbency. It is not. It is about what is going to be the best representation for this district going forward. And with the greatest respect from our city, you probably won't get someone with a strong land use background sitting around the table. And it adds to the fact that we have lawyers and accountants and people with a skill in science and a strong conservation background and a land use background and even a strong surfing background around the table. Larry tells us often about surf breaks. So it's about what representation you get around the table. And I think we all need to reflect on, and I've always been a bit of a hoarder. So from last year, 3 years ago, when we did our review, and the media need to look at this. So this is the size of Tairāwhiti, and this is your rural ward structure right now. And do you think that 8 people from down here are going to do a really good job representing the whole of this region and travelling as we do and as we should to our rural communities? And whether we live on a farm up a side road or in a township, many of our issues are exactly the same. We understand what the issues are for them around flooding, like this morning, around their water supply, which they have to provide for themselves, around their sewage supply, services they have to provide for themselves. So to one comment that I heard once that rural councillors are all farmers and they can't understand what township issues are, I absolutely say that is not so. We do understand what township issues are. They have issues with dogs and roaming dogs, just as your dwellers in the city do. So I urge you to think about what this council will look like going forward. It isn't about the now, it's for the next 10 years. For the next 6 years at least. And rural representation has always been important. It has always served this district well. And I urge you to consider that it will continue to serve this district well, regardless of who those people are sitting around this table. So I urge you to vote against the recommendation on the table right now. I acknowledge the points Councillor Dowsing made. It will likely go to the higher authority for review, but let's actually put our thinking caps on and remember what they said last time. 9 councillors elected at large in the city was not going to provide for a unitary authority, and they mandated the different structure that we have today, albeit that was not what this council put forward, but was again at that time opposed by 2 rural councillors quite strongly as individuals to the Commission's hearing. So I urge you to think about that. We will all have our say today. I urge you to vote against the recommendation on the table. Should I get the opportunity to put up the alternative, it would be exactly as the staff report appears, with B having a number 1, number 2, and number 3, the inclusion of Tairāwhiti Rural Ward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Seymour. Josh Wharehinga.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I really like what Councillor Dowsing had put forward about the makeup of our wards, but then also including a rationale around us the creation of a Tairawhiti rural ward. I do like that in regards to us pre-thinking and pre-planning how this will be viewed at LGC, at the Local Government Commission. I'm even happy to support Councillor Dowsing's, or happy to second Councillor Dowsing's suggestion that this come forward. I think it's actually, yeah, for me, the bigger thing about the suggestion that Councillor Dowsing has put forward is that is the word consensus, is that ethos of us trying to build a collective decision here. I think it's actually a very brave thing to do, because it shifts from where Councillor Dowsing originally was thinking in regards to our representation review model moving forward, which is why I'm happy to second Councillor Dowsing's recommendations. The one thing that I would like to urge us to do before I forget and moving forward is, when we take these recommendations, can we please take the Māori ward decision part of the recommendation separately? Because one of the things that came through clearly from feedback from the community last time, and that was spread across Facebook head statuses and things like that, was council split 7-6 on Māori wards, which is not true. The 7-6 split was in regards to an establishment of the rural ward, and both recommendations was Māori ward. There was consensus for that. So I'll just like to ask that we take that separate. I'd also like to ask us to consider the words of building consensus, because this is a very pragmatic way moving forward. The data actually does support the Councillor Dowsing's recommendation moving forward. The actual paper does support the establishment of a rural ward, because the community had feedback that they're not, 49% of the feedback was they're not interested in one general ward as a whole, you know, and it's less, and it's not saying that 51% supported it, it's saying that 4% didn't know, 7% didn't answer, or something like that. Anyway, the majority of the people said, hey, we don't want one whole general ward. And that's our job. And I'd be very, that's our job, to listen to the community and create the infrastructure, create their ideas based on the feedback that our community has given us. And it would be, I feel that that's a very strong position in the shaping up to take to the Local Government Commission, which is why I'd fully support and second Councillor Dowsing's suggestion. Whether or not the part about defining rural needs to be in that recommendations, or could be in a note afterwards, I'm happy to play around with that wording. And I would have seconded this sooner, but I was following the Mayor's direction around waiting all of our turns. So thank you very much.
Thank you for that. So I've got no hands up, so I'm going to have a bite at the cherry. So you all know how I feel about our discussions here. And last night I was thinking about how today will roll out. And I have a vague idea, because I often say I'm not the mayor, I'm the camp mother. People like to tell me stuff. So I've got a good idea how people are feeling around the table. But when I thought to myself, so why do you feel this way? Why do you see the decision you are making? I've been thinking about, since we came into office 2 years ago, we've made a lot of changes. We have, and changes that we should be proud of. And we have always tried to take our community with us. It's not always straightforward. And sometimes we have an opportunity to have a bite at the cherry several times, and our community might only read a little bit in the Gisborne Herald or watch a little bit of the live feed, but they might not be as clued up as we are, because we just have so much more time to digest all the information. So I thought last night we've changed to STV, which I personally struggled with in the beginning, because it's not easy for people always to get their head around it. But if you read into it more, it is a fairer voting system. You do get fairer representation. It is just the whole process that's quite tough. So we've done that. Then we've listened to our community and we proudly brought in Māori wards. And as you will hear around the table today, what Councillor Seymour said, what Councillor Wharehinga said, we're proud of that. We have made a change recognising we need different voices around our table, and we're happy to include that. So now we move to the general wards system. And we clearly heard from our community when we consulted that they value having people that live in their communities, and it won't be going forward. It might not be someone living in your community because it is a vast area, but it will be people with a lived experience, people that know about culverts and slips in the road, people that, and if I go up to Ruatoria and Bill and myself on Radio Ngāti Porou, stuff that Bill know because he has that lived experience, which I don't have. So that's why I value that part of input from someone with that lived rural experience. Having 2 rural councillors doesn't mean city councillors are going to sit arms folded and tell those 2 rural councillors, well, you've got this whole geographical area that you need to service. How I look at it, it's 2 people living in those areas who have had those lived experiences, which us that live in the city don't have, and they bring that voice to the table. So I know that our community also said, hey, we want to be able to vote for all councillors, and I respect that. And there's not a right or wrong today. Today, there is us having listened to our community, and a clear message I heard was that our rural community really would value and see value in us, retaining some of that rural input, which people bring that live in those rural communities. So my position hasn't changed. I'm happy to second Councillor Seymour's recommendation if the first, no, but Larry and Tony passed that. So that's where I sit today. I thought a lot, we've made a lot of changes. We're trying to take our community with us in a changing environment. We might not change everything immediately, and it might be over time as our community and our region change that more change happen. But we don't have to do it all at once. I feel at this stage, the rural voice is still important in our region. So that is where I am leaning towards. I'm going to allow one more person to speak quick, smart. So if you have a long story, you will have to wait until after morning tea because we're going to break in 5 minutes. So I'm going to put Sandra down there because she showed me small talk, and then small talk, and then just put your hands up who had your hands up so I can put you on my list. Sandra. Okay, hands up again. I've missed that. Yeah, I could just, yeah. Okay, Sandra, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm heartened to hear that I wasn't the only one lying awake over various nights on this particular subject, and I absolutely acknowledge your conversation earlier, Shannon. I think it's actually really enlightening. So that's, thank you. Now, all I wanted to bring to the table was, as a ratepayer looking into this room, how do you want to engage with this group of my colleagues? And as a rural ratepayer, prior to becoming a councillor here, I always felt that I could pick up the phone and talk to, in my case, Councillor Seymour. Now, I don't know anything about Councillor Seymour's farming operation. I don't know anything about her business per se on the land, but I know that she, as I say, prior to me coming into this room, she heard me as a ratepayer of a land-based business, which was also my home. And that is so deeply personal. So it's a slightly different way of looking at it. It's, you know, we have the privilege here around this table of really clearly understanding how we slice and dice it. We can have a whole bunch of different opinions on you know, the levels of expertise or the lived experience that's required to make great decisions and all of those sort of things. But at the end of the day, what it comes right down to is the conversation, the connection between the ratepayer and councillor, and feeling like they are heard and understood. So I also have not changed my position for that reason, but I have very much appreciated the discussion and indeed have learnt a lot from the discussion. So I think the conversation has been of value to our region. It will change slightly the way we come across in the next term, but I still believe that the rural voice needs to be represented, land-based businesses, family homes, people talking face to face. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm going to allow one more person. I'm just waiting for our guests still. The next on my list was Tony Robinson.
So it's been said a couple of times this morning that we're a council that likes to listen to our community and do what they ask, and that, you know, the majority of people who submitted were not in favour of a single general ward for the district. Nor, if you look at page 32, were the majority of people who submitted in favour of a district-wide Māori ward. 47% did not support it and 42% did. The same 5% margin difference between the general ward. However, we didn't listen to those, majority did we? And we actually approved Māori wards. So frankly, that logic and obligation fails there. The Local Electoral Act principles that we need to concern ourselves with is about fair and effective representation. And frankly, 2 general role councillors for the entire Tairāwhiti region outside the city, in my view, will not provide fair and effective representation for that space. You're joking. Give those people the chance to elect 8, then you're getting nearer the ballpark. If you break down the submissions that we received, of the ones that opposed a general ward district-wide boundary, 49%, if you look at the Māori role in that, 70% supported it. 70% of Māori role submitters supported a Tairāwhiti-wide general ward. And this paper that's been presented to us, particularly the work that's been done on the STV, shows there is, I think, what's the number of Māori voters in the general ward? 7,500 Māori electors across the district on the general ward. Now, we've spoken at length about our obligations to Māori, our treaty partners, or the council's treaty partners. If you say to those general role Māori that you are only going to be entitled to 2 people if you fall outside the city, can you be said to be adhering to the same principles we've applied in supporting the creation of Māori wards for Māori on the Māori role? No, you haven't. You're actually creating a highly inequitable position. You're denying those people access to the maximum amount of representation. You are denying democracy. Plain and simple. A district-wide general ward still provides many avenues of access to land-based experiences. I don't have to be a farmer to know about farming issues. I don't have to be a farmer to know about culverts or dropouts or bad roads. These are problems which affect our region, but they are not specific to people who live outside the city. To make decisions at this table, I bring my own personal experiences. I look at what the staff present to us on papers, and I know that the information that we are given at every agenda and every paper takes a pan-regional approach. So I'm really confident that the information I've provided is going to capture the rural vote, sorry, the rural voice, the rural perspective, the rural issue. We don't sit here going, oh, where's the rural flavour in this? It's always captured. So from an information decision-making basis, you could be from anywhere in Tairāwhiti and sitting at this table, but you're still going to get the right information to make the decision. You don't have to be a farmer to sit here and make the decision about a region-wide issue. There are many avenues. There are RFSs, there are the staff papers, there's public deputations, there's our own experiences, our own connectivities, whānau, business, social. We are all linked with experiences across this region, right? I've got uncles who farm from Waimata up to Wairingakuri. Do I know about those experiences? Yes, I learned to shoot on those farms. I learned to drive a Land Rover, ride a motorbike. That's where I did my formative growing up. I know about their experiences. I'm a phone call away. In fact, I spoke to them one recently. He said, no, there's been far too much rural representation on council. It's time for a change. The reality is creating 2 rural seats, and I'll call them rural seats, will deprive a significant aspect of our community full access to democracy and won't provide fair and effective representation. I understand where Shannon's coming from with this point, but if we say yes, but, what will be heard will be the yes. The but is the biggie. The paper presented by the staff, I want to congratulate them. This is a really excellent piece of work, and you just can't deny, as Larry's already pointed out, if you really read this paper, the appendix from page 38 onwards, you could not sensibly go with a rural ward. You just simply couldn't. It clearly sets out the effect the STV voting system is going to have on providing the most comprehensive, the most fairest, and the most effective form of representation for the entire region. And what it seems to be is that a number of people in this room are going to vote despite what that paper clearly says. Now, you might be voting from a position of your own experience, your own interests, your own concerns. I don't think anyone's voting from their own interest because we can't ensure anyone's going to be at the same table, at this table next time round. But I, having read that paper, can't get past the logic. I can't deny the logic, and I can't contradict the logic. An STV on a Tairāwhiti-wide general ward will provide the most effective and comprehensive form of democracy. And frankly, people, our community deserve that. They don't deserve less than that. And if you vote for rural wards, you're going to give them less than that. Now, if it's an abject failure, and if it turns out that we fail miserably to take account of rural issues over the next 6 years, then there is an avenue for changing it. But I strongly believe that rural wards are going to sell our people short. Why on earth would you give farmers the right to have 2 people as opposed to 8? Heck, read the paper. Well-organized, well-actioned marketing of your campaign, you could end up with 3 or 4 highly rural-focused candidates come out of it, or Māori, or Asian or Pacifica, or youth. I'm not going to deny people that opportunity, and I'm going to be really disappointed, but I think some of you are.
Thank you for that, Councillor Robinson, and we will carry this on afterwards. Councillors, you will not be aware that today is Coral's last day with council. It's tomorrow, 11. But today we are saying thank you to dear Coral for the wonderful, wonderful work. And as you will see, our special guests in the back, Meng and Ying, are here today to also say thank you to Coral for the wonderful, great work that you have done. Coral, I'll ask Meng to say a few words soon because you ran his office, and in brackets ran the town then, because I often say to Donna, you're really running the town. You did such a great job when you also helped me transition when I took over from Meng, and I just want to acknowledge that today, say thank you for that. But I do want to thank you, Coral, when I'm chairing a meeting and I don't know what's going on and everyone's talking at the same time, and I don't know if someone moved or seconded something, and there are, like today, 3 recommendations on the table moved by lots of different people. I know I can just look in your way and you will say to me, this one moved this one seconded. And you also, through all of that, pick up the wording. So I do want to thank you today. I know we're in safe hands when you take the minutes. Whenever I take a look at what you leave on my desk to review, the minutes are always perfect. Coral can listen and write and type and also take note at the same time. So I just want to acknowledge your great service here with council today. And I invite Ming to come on up. Come on, Mr. Ming. No, you just stay there because Ming broke his foot while he was mountain biking. So Ming, you can hobble up. Welcome Ying as well. And then afterwards, we're going to ask you to join us for a lovely cup of tea and just to say thank you to Coral for the wonderful service to the Gisborne District Council.
Woo. Wonderful to be with you all. It's a long time between drinks. Your worship, councillors, staff, it is a great opportunity to say a few words, and it's been a long time that I haven't said a few words in this chamber. But I just want to say, you know, they say that the efficient running of the district
Thank you. Okay, so we are back on. I do have my little list. We have Bill Bedett, then Kerry Warsnop.
I'm going to be brief. You know where I sit on this one. But 2, 3, 4 councils ago, both it's appropriate Ming was here today. Ming and I faced the Electoral Commission in the old building, appealing to retain the status quo at the time, the rural wards. And on that occasion, they listened. It wasn't too much of an effort to convince them that the rural wards were so important. I'm just going to quote a couple of things and then I'll sit down. Both Ming and Rehet have been in the northern region of our district. They know when we talk about the top end in Tukumi. We've had meetings at Waikura Woolshed. The only other person in the whole of my time that came north was the councillor that resigned, Amber. She came as far as Ruatoria. The only other occasion when we all went was just after the elections. Now, I don't know, and I'm not going to get into the knocking as Tony did earlier. I just think the rural ward position, the representation, the understanding of the issues is so important it can't be thrown out the window. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you for that, Councillor Burdett. Councillor Warsnop. Everyone will get an opportunity, to those that have not spoken yet and those that have spoken. Don't bother to put your hand up because I will give people first. I'll give everyone that haven't spoken and then we will go. So don't put your hand up again. I'll get to you. Thank you. Councillor Warsnop.
Yeah, thank you. I just firstly want to say I appreciate Shannon's words earlier, in particular, the fact that he articulated the challenge that is trying to reconcile what are different principles and different priorities that we give to what we or how we weight a decision like this. And I think fundamentally for me, there's some merit in some of the arguments for having an at-large system. And I think the challenge again, it's the weighting that you give to those opportunities relative to the risk. I would love to say that I'd wholeheartedly embrace the opportunity with going with an at-large system, but I think that the risk that that opportunity isn't realised is higher and warrants more weight. And therefore, I'm unable to change the position in spite of the fact that the STV portion of this paper highlights that the rural areas could elect at least 2 rural councillors. That's quite different from saying that they will elect 2 rural councillors, which is what you get if you do retain the rural wards. In the event that, you know, a number of rural councillors stand, then in actual fact, the odds of any of them getting in go down quite dramatically. The reality is that we do need different perspectives at this table. We heard from the people themselves who would be voting in that ward that that's what they wanted to see. And I don't know why it matters to anyone who's not in that ward, that that's what they would want. If that's what they want, why not allow it? It should make no difference to anybody else who's not voting in that ward. If they want to limit themselves to 2 candidates, why on earth would you begrudge them that? If anything, that should be an advantage to everybody else if you genuinely believe that they would likely to get 2 or more otherwise. So I maintain the fact that, especially in the environment that we are governing in at the moment, the scale of change and a reflection on why so many people submitted is there is an enormous amount of pressure coming on the whole primary sector. And to say that that's just farms or that's just forests, or that's not true. The townships are full of people who are engaged and work within those sectors, whether they are driving trucks, whether they are picking crops, whether they are fencing, whether they are shearing. The reality is that the rural community doesn't operate in silos. It's a web, and that web reaches out from and across all of the land-based sectors. And when one of them takes a hit, the whole rest of them feel the pull. They feel the pressure, they feel the pain. That is why to try and break it down into, you know, a community of interest for farmers or a community for townships it doesn't work like that. They ebb and flow together. A thriving rural community is a thriving rural township. A really hurting rural township is probably a reflection of a hurting rural community. They go together. I maintain the fact that it's really important that we have diversity around this table and we have perspectives. I acknowledge the fact that it's a defensive position and that 2 councillors, it will require the effort of the whole table to service this region and to understand the issues, particularly the issues in the next few years that relate to land management. But you will be richer for having those voices at the table that tell you where to look. To Tony's point that we will know because staff tell us, how would you know if they didn't tell you? That's what your diversity of opinion, that's what your diversity of background, that's what that richness is there for. It's to highlight if there's something that has been missed. Because as great as our staff might be, they're not perfect any more than we are perfect. We will miss stuff. There will be things that are topical, that are on the ground in your community that might not necessarily make it to this table. And the further you get away from this city, the higher that likelihood gets. So I'm not in support of, obviously, the preferred arrangement, and I'll be supporting Pat. Thank you.
Okay, let's take a look. Anyone that still want to have a say, now is your time. Otherwise, I'm going to move to I am just putting together all the recommendations in front of me. Okay, Debbie, you go. Thank you.
Thank you. It feels a little bit like Groundhog Day. Thank you for this report to the staff, which to me feels that it confirms our earlier decision to create 1 general ward and 1 Māori ward and all of the other things in the recommendation. When I read the report, I find myself noting point after point that supports that decision, and the fact that the change to STV voting offers fair representation of community of interests is really clear in that paper. And also, I think with all the changes that we're making, the more simple we keep it, the better for the general public. We know that STV will take care of these community of interests, and that's, as Larry has said, clearly explained on page 38. I just wanted to address the consultation analysis that Pat spoke about. To me, it appears flawed, and I've said this before, and it actually says that the over 70s are overrepresented and other age groups underrepresented. And added to that, from my past life as a farm reporter, as I read the submissions, I noted a fair number of opposition was from the sheep and beef sector, as I've said before. And to me, this makes the consultation unbalanced. Federated Farmers said that they had run a campaign and it was successful. It achieved a good response. There was a lot of response. But I asked, did it give a well-rounded view from Tairāwhiti people? And my last point is local historian Jane Luton's report into local government here says that Gisborne District Council has been dominated by rural non-Maori interests since its inception. So policy development and delivery is shaped by the governing demographic, but this is not representative of the Tairāwhiti population. I think that today we make history making this decision. We'll be looking back at this to say that that was the day that that decision was made, or maybe not, maybe when it goes off to the, wherever it goes, it might be made then. I just think we're entering a new era of local government in more ways than one. And I just strongly feel that to vote against the recommendation, in my view, actually would be irresponsible. Thank you.
There were hands that I saw. Shannon, and then, no, Shannon, you've spoken, so I'm going to give.
What's the motion?
You have not spoken to this motion, so Shannon, you go, then Isaac, then Terry, then Andy. Oh, Meredith, I did not see you, so Shannon, you go, Isaac.
Thank you. Let me just bring up my notes quickly. So I'm going to speak in support of Councillor Foster's motion. It is still my belief that the representation in this region will best be served by voting at large, specifically because a single community of interest cannot be defined by our rural area. And I want to put that in context of an argument point I made several times. So a full half of the Western rural general electorate voting population, a full half of them live in Hexton. So Hexton does not have the same profile as the top of the East Cape. Hexton does not have the same profile as Te Arai. It's a deprivation 3 area versus a deprivation 9. To call that a single community of interest is not accurate. Likewise, if you extract that population from the population total of the rural area, then it's likely to reduce to either being way outside margins or to only having a single representative in the rural area. Particularly if you then start talking about Makarori as an area that doesn't fit that profile as well. So as a single community of interest, if this was taken to the local government commission, I believe that this would fail to meet the requirements. I was willing to discuss the opportunity of putting it forward and allowing them to make that determination. But from discussion today, it doesn't sound like that will gain a consensus at this table anyway. So I'll speak to my beliefs on the practicalities of what we're putting forward. And as you've all heard, I think that that is the sticking point for me. It is simply that all of our rural area, inclusive of peri-urban, inclusive of coastal, inclusive of deprivation 3 to deprivation 10 areas, inclusive of Western, inclusive of Eastern, they are not. They can never be a single community of interest. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Dowsing. I move on to Councillor Hughes, Terry, Andy, Meredith.
I'll just get my notes here so I make sure I don't miss anything. So I voted for an at-large system proposal to go out to the community initially because this allowed rural voters the chance to push back if they value dedicated representation. So nothing worse than rural people being lulled into a false sense of security only to have a few votes flipped today. So to Tony's point and what we are voting against in terms of what people want, the general ward boundary, the general role feedback on the general ward boundary, who are the people affected by this, 67 did not support. So Māori role are voting in the Māori role. And to that point, 69 of them supported a district-wide boundary, and we did go with their consensus and gave them their district-wide. So just to counter that point, I do feel we have actually listened to the people in both those senses. People that are affected should be able to choose how they want to be elected, and 6 years is a long time to deal with a mistake. So if rural people don't feel adequately represented by 2 councillors after 3 years, we might be able to shift to at large. And to Rehet's point, we don't have to make all changes at once. In any case, I would hope amongst the 5 Māori councillors as well, we would also have some rural representation due to population. So what I noticed in my short time on council is when we were doing our long-term plan engagement, due to local councillors, the proportional engagement relative to the population in those rural communities was incredible. So we went to Tolaga Bay, we had 50 people show up, and how many people live in Tolaga? Where we come to town, we might get 50 people show up. So I feel the rural voice has spoken. They want dedicated representation. I do not necessarily personally agree with this. In fact, I think they may be better served by a STV system, but I'm not affected by that. I personally feel, yeah, they would have a greater influence over a larger block of councillors, but they have spoken and said, no, we'd rather have a safe 2 option. So I will defy the Rolling Stones and you can have what you want. And in doing so, I'm hopefully proving that city councillors can act in the best interest of rural constituents and maybe contradicting my vote.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hughes. Councillor Sheldrake, thank you.
Thank you. I've over my working life, I've lived and worked on farms, and I just want to run across where I've worked. Tineroto, Wharekopai, Tauwhi Pārai, Wairinga-Kuri, up the top end of Riverside Road, and to top it off, I also worked on Councillor Faulkner's family farm. The only difference being back in my farming days is in the rural areas at that time, we had a local roadman. He had his own grader and a shovel. And we've learned recently that Mr. Wilson has fixed up the engagement with contractors for rural roading and stuff. So I'd like to think that the new moves there will fix it. In doing my own research, I took the time to ring many business people who are in the rural sector. I rang farmers and I asked all of them, what's the major challenge for the rural communities? And they all said roading. Not one could offer something additional that I would put a value on that a person sitting as a city councillor could not address or look after. And as Councillor Burdett said himself, he puts in requests for services and things when things go down and people ring to complain. Whoever gets elected at the next election, via oath, has got to represent this total Tairāwhiti community, whether they're on the Māori roll or the general roll. And that's it. We're signing an oath that will represent everybody. And I can understand Her Worship going up and going on Radio Ngāti Porou with Councillor Burdett, but things are changing. The time is changing. And I can't move past my initial stance on this, what I support. I have travelled to meetings in Wharekaupai and in Tolaga Bay previously. And if I was back here and there was a meeting to be in Te Aroha, I would go to it. I'm not on the health board or other things. I committed to being a district councillor of a unitary authority. Here we are, so that's what I'm doing. Other thing that has come up previously from one of our colleagues saying we have no idea, city folk have no idea of deprivation and people living in these rural communities. I'd just like you to know that actually I chaired victim support in Gisborne for about 5 years. I understand what deprivation is rurally and within the city. My discussions from speaking with the business folk and the rural and city voters who I rang and took the time to talk to really just want a greater choice for all. They want to be able to vote for multiple people. And I just think with the STV system, this is a fair approach. As I said before, times have changed. I hold my position that we have 2 wards, a general ward and a Māori ward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sheldrake. Councillor Cranston and then Akuata Brown, and then everyone has had one say. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. And thanks for the paper. It does reiterate our position at that time. And I see no reason to change it myself. First point is accessibility, and Councillor Seymour has pointed to her map and argued the accessibility. That has gone by the wayside, dropping down to 2, which we cannot do anything about. We're always going to be 2. Now, that one person on the east could come from Makarori, or they could come from Hicks Bay. And the other thing is, they might not necessarily be a farmer. On the west side, they could come from Muruwai, or they could come from Marawai. So the accessibility argument sort of goes out for me, and that is a result of going down to 2 councillors from 4. There was definitely more accessibility with 4, but it has been lost and we cannot do anything about that. But what we can do is take up Bill's point about not attending in Ruatoria. Now, I've never been to a meeting, had an invite to a meeting that I've not attended. So if we're not invited, how can we know? So where we need to get to from here is with the new council, is accepting the responsibility of how we are there for the whole district and have those invites go out to councillors. Because if I was invited to Ruatoria and they said, this is a meeting that we want you to attend, I would attend. I definitely would have, but I haven't had the invite. So that's why I didn't attend. As far as submitters go, which was Councillor Seymour's other point with the 40, pointing out to the percentage when you look at submissions, the 47 that were against Māori Wood not being observed with 43 against. That's further, there's a further story in that, as we've heard from the likes of Ngāti Porou, when the iwi leaders have got there and said, we are speaking for many people. My voice is one, but it represents thousands. So we do have to keep that in context, you know, where we're looking at these submissions. Second guessing hasn't been helpful in this as well. We are second guessing that there will be rural councillors selected under the wider system. And I still believe that, but it's a gut feel and it may not happen. But I sincerely believe it will. I sincerely believe there will be at least 2 rural councillors around this table under a wider system, and probably more, possibly more. The other second guessing we've got is what the commission will do when we submit to them. Got no idea. So I do believe that the 8 voices representing the rural is a far better option for rural than the 1 on the west or the 1 on the east, 2 in total. My conversations with people is they do want to be able to select the table, not just 1 or 2 people. They want to be able to have the best impact on selecting the table where the decisions are made. So I support the recommendations as they stand.
Thank you for that. Councillor Akuata Brown, thank you.
when I first got the chance to speak to Māori wards, I quoted Martin Luther King, "The time is always right to do what is right." And today I'll stand by that statement again, but to keep my discussion today concise and on point, after some wonderful role modelling of that from Councillor Gregory, I've decided to go with the acronym RURAL. So to keep me on track, RURAL, with all respect, absolute respect to our rural communities here today as an urban dweller, but respect to the work that is happening out on the landscape and the hinterlands and the whole rural landscape. I have the utmost respect for rural people. I really do. I've got family, friends who work in that space. This is a risk. We're talking about change. With change comes risk. Risk to people who feel that their voice might get lost. And I hear that, so I know the voiceless. I know them well. So I want to start by saying, when I first arrived at this table, it was about representation. And I was shocked at some of the rudeness. I was, because I was thinking these people are standing. There was quite an amount of racist redneckedness on reflection, but all the changes that have come about. I want to thank my rural councillors today, because there's been some change in that directive. There's been some change in that narrative. And I'm so grateful, because it was very hurtful. So this is about representation. That's what this is all about. A fair and equal and better representation. And by golly, here we are. We get to do this on our charge as electeds today. To just say we want better, fairer, more equal and more inclusive. Boy, is that an awesome framework to come to this table today. So I'm so excited. This is about representation. It's my first R. The U, of course, stands for a unitary authority. We are a unitary authority. We have to look after everybody that chooses to live, work and play in this region. And that takes a lot of work. And I want to mihi to our CEO and to our staff for all the mahi they do with those reports that we expect have a region-wide thinking cap on. That's hard work in a changing environment right now. So as a unitary authority, we do have to do a lot. There's a lot of expectation on us and we don't always get it right. We got to work with the stakeholders and some of them don't do it right. Waka kotai, I'm ringing them today. So as a unitary authority, this is about all of the region. The next R is all about the region, the ratepayer. Ratepayers want to know that they elect people who get their story because they're paying their rates, their land tax to us to use. So we've got to be fiscally prudent to our ratepayers. We've got to stand for them in this space. We're the elected. And ratepayers want us to be good decision makers, robust discussionners. They want us to make a stand. And they know they get that when they elect us, because that's why they elected us. We were the chosen. So as a ratepayer myself, I'm not always happy with how things go there. I've thought about getting a remit and all of that rebate. Rurals know that stuff. They've got it on hand. They're the people that this was set up for, fundamentally. So ratepayers, we hear you. The A, initially I was trying to think of it, it's about all of us, the aggregation of everything to do with this region and us as people who live, work and play here. We all want a fair deal. We all have something to complain about. We all feel at times not listened to. But when you come into this space, there's legislative requirements, there's statutory requirements, there's a whole host of things we don't actually all get to have a say on. In fact, that's our pushback to this government. Respect to this. But all of us in our aggravated space of coming together are always trying to think about what's the best for everyone. We're seeing a beautiful pool facility being built when we know houses need it. But we have to work with that for all of us. We've got municipal spaces that half our populace can't even afford to go to. So how does it work for all of us? That's a tough discussion to have, and we have it in here. Well, it was going to just be about love, because I love this place with everything that I've got. I was born here in 1970, and I've loved this place all my life. Even though my whakapapa is Tainui and Kahununu, this is where I was born, and I love it. And I'll represent it to the best of my abilities till the day I die. Landowners have been the loudest in respect to this whole debate. And the reason that we've had this frustration of moving forward and change is because there's fear. There's worry about that loud voice being consumed. This is about all of us together saying we want to speak for those hinterland rurals. We want to be able to say, that's my whānau live up there. I go up there all the time. I've got whānau out here and out here. My job is to sit here, collect up everything I've got to read and understand it, and then give a decision that's about a consensus, a togetherness. Doesn't always work out like that, eh, Bill? But here we are today saying, let's do better. Let's be a community that's more inclusive, allowing all people to have access to, and vote for as many as you want. To me, that's liberty. That's about loving this region more than you can know. My job in here is to understand the concerns of everyone here, not just my little group of people of interest, everyone. So rurals, I stand here today, kia ora to you, that I phoned and I got some more debate about, and I realised I wasn't doing my job good enough. To those rurals listening today, I'm ready to do better, as I think all of us are. So my vote is with what the paper has said, because the staff worked so hard to make this happen. Let's legislate to make a better place to live, work and play. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Akmaraka Brown. Okay. I'm going to move to our first recommendation. Can you just let me finish before you jump on? I'm going to go with our first recommendation. Where were my notes? There we go. So our first recommendation that we have here is the recommendation that is in our paper on page 30. So what I'm going to ask is that we vote for the stuff we all agree on and get it out of the way. Because I'm not going to run through every single thing if we move through different areas. We've got 1A, everyone agrees we want a mayor and 13 councillors. Then B is the one that we are at this stage discussing.
A says 8 general ward councillors, so I don't think we can vote for
Where
A.
are we, Councillor Seymour?
You talked about A, which it starts out okay, a mayor and 13
Thank you for
councillors,
that.
but it then says 5 Maori ward councillor and
Okay.
8 general, so it's the
So
last.
A and B, we will keep aside. Thank you for pointing that out. So C, everyone talks about the community boards, Māori ward councillors. We talk about the total number of councillors. Tell our CEO to do a final, also give public notice, and instruct the CEO to formally advise the local government commission that our iwi also wish to speak. Capish? So, Councillor Foster and Councillor Robinson, you are the movers of that. Are you happy for me to put those C to H, just stuff that we all agree on, and then we will move? Am I confusing people now?
I just clarify on point H, that is with regard to the final proposal that's currently on the recommendation list. So if the recommendations change, H may not still stand.
But then iwi might wish to speak in not
Opposition.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Councillor Foster, you have a right of reply because I can see in people's eyes that I'm just confusing them now. So I'm going to pass on straight over to you and ask for your right of reply. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Look, everyone acknowledges the importance of rural representation. Rural representation is what this council has always had and always will. It's just the form that we are trying to achieve to acquire the best representation around this table. We've got a diverse council at the moment, and we have actually had diverse councils in the past, pretty much the most diverse in the whole country. So I can't see that changing in the future. This system that we've got, the STV system, it just suits the at-large. It doesn't suit rural councillors, and I'm going to ask staff later if they can explain why it doesn't suit 5 councillors or less, because that's in the paper and I can totally understand why, but I'd like it from staff to actually reiterate it. Because when you look at this here, from the 2019 elections, And now we've got the general wards and the Maori wards separated. We've got the numbers here. And according to this, there's 1,200 votes that would get any councillor in a large election based on the statistics of the 2019, because not everyone votes. So, you know, if and a rural councillor, a rural candidate, and there could be heaps of rural candidates, and I hope they are, and I hope we promote the fact that we will encourage rural candidates to stand as much as possible, because we know how important they are. But you know, we've got Matakawa Waipawa in the general ward, 962. This is from, and it'd be more now because this was back in 2019. The Tawhiti Paratahi, 1136. Waipawa, 1,400. I mean, you know, those numbers alone is going to vote the minimum of 2 councillors in anyway, 2 rural representation. And as I said, and I've said all along, city voters, if we're going to separate us out, we're district councillors, but city voters know the importance of rural representation, and they will, of course, vote their preferred representative from the rural area as well. So for me, and particularly now that this information has come through from this analysis, just reinforces the importance of having a very simple at-large system on an STV voting criteria. It's a no-brainer, you know, because that is the most fairest system that there is, and it allows everyone to vote for 8 representatives to represent them from whatever area they're from, whether it's rural, whether it's beachside, in the bush, whatever, you know, it allows people to have that representation. And I'd just like to now our staff or someone from staff, if they could reiterate why 5 councillors or less, because in this particular case it'll be 2, why the STV system does not work in this scenario. Thanks. Is there someone that could tell me that?
Are you talking about if you had?
Thank you.
Okay, all right. Well,
Okay,
read-
so are you finished, Councillor Foster? Thank you for your right of reply. So now I take everyone to page 30. We have a recommend division asked for by Councillor Seymour and Councillor Wharehinga. So 1A.
Also, I'd like to ask a point of clarification, please, Your Worship.
I can't hear you.
I'd like to ask a point of clarification, please, Your Worship.
Yes.
Earlier on, I had asked for the Māori ward vote to be taken separately. I'm worried that we're taking B collectively together. I would like to ask, just for clarity around the comments that I said before, for that first little paragraph B1 and B2, if we're separating them out, those two parts to be taken separately.
People happy with that?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, so
1A could end at 5 Maori ward councillors, because it's that piece about at the end of 1A, 8 general ward councillors that's still in debate.
But so what I'm going to do now is put this whole recommendation, which is on the table, the whole of page 30 at this stage is on the table, moved by Councillor Foster, seconded by Councillor Robinson. I will go through those and people can vote on it. Kapish, everyone is clear? Good. Okay. So 1A is just the number of people in the wards. 1B, we've broken up into 1B1 and 1B2. 3 is about the community boards. D is the number of Māori ward councillors. Total number of councillors, next one, and then the 2 instructions for, or 3 instructions for the CEO at the end. Okay, so are we going to break up every single one and go through it?
Madam Chair, can I suggest you could take C to H collectively, because nobody's debating those, and I thought that's actually what you suggested.
Yep, that is what I suggested, but I saw
earlier.
eyes.
But
C to H. I'm on page 30, recommendation C to H All in favour? Contrary? Carried. So we've cleared C to H. Now we're going to go into our division bits. 1A.
Madam Chair, can we finish that at 5 Murray Wood Council if we can? Because that's quite vague, that he wants us to be able to vote on Murray Wood Council quite specifically.
So B1 is what we're going to do.
Yes, but 1A brings Murray Wood councillors and general ward councillors one sentence which some of us suggested.
Mr. James Beattie, thank you, Councillor
Yeah,
Seymour, for
through the
pointing that out.
chair, if council is sticking with 13 councillors, you don't have actually any option but to stick with 8 and 5. That is determined by the formula in the legislation. So Councillor Seymour is speaking to how that split will occur, which is where you may have a departure, which is in the next section. So 1A actually stands if you're going to retain 13 councillors. It simply says that you're going to have 5 from the Māori ward and 8 from a general ward. Whether that 8 is from one district-wide ward or a split is over to you, and that's in the next section.
Councillor Dowsing.
Thank you. Can we just clarify that that should be 8 councillors elected from the general electorate instead of saying ward?
Can you change the wording, please, Coral?
And likewise, 5 councillors.
Okay, so 1A. Coral, can you please read 1A out? Shh.
Five councillors elected from the Māori electorate and 8 councillors elected from the general electorate.
Mr. Beattie, can you just
Through the
clarify?
chair, that's kind of superfluous. You're talking about establishing a Māori ward. By law, you can only vote in the Māori ward if you're on the Māori roll. And likewise, in the general ward, you can only be on the general roll to vote in it. So that the wording of those sections is fine as it stands. We've had it legally checked. We've had it checked by 2 people who are very well known in this industry. It's actually fine. The part where you're going to have to decide is whether you're going district wide for both wards, whether you're going to split the general ward. From what I understand, there's not an appetite to split the Māori ward. So on that basis, I don't think it's necessary to add any further words to clarify the split.
So it's only B1 and B2 which we need to worry about. Because if this is carried, this will then go, 1A goes ahead. If it's not carried, it will still go ahead. It will just be split differently. So, okay, so 1A is, everyone agrees with 1A. It's just how it is said. We will still have 5 people elected from the Māori roll and 8 people elected from the general roll.
I would prefer it to say that. Yes,
so can we say Gisborne district comprise, in addition to the mayor, 13 councillors, 5 being elected from the Māori roll and 8 being elected from the general roll? Does that make sense, Mr. Beattie?
Your worship, that doesn't work because people from other roles can run in the other wards. So I suggest we keep it the same.
Okay, I'm going to make a call in here. We stick to Mr. Beattie's original wording because that has been checked. We will still be able to have our individual says at B1 and B2. Everyone happy? Well, I think to me it's quite clear. We're going to have 13 councillors. 5 of those will be elected from the Māori roll and 8 will be elected from the general roll. If we decide to cut up the 8 into 6 and 2, that's fine. We will determine that in B1 and B2. Does that make sense to everyone? So it doesn't matter what we decide, 5 people will come from our Māori roll and 8 people will come from our general roll. And in B1 and B2, we will then decide how we cut it up. Does it make sense to everyone, or am I misinterpreting this?
That, if I can speak, Your Worship, that does make sense. However, we can't say that it will be 5 from the Māori roll, because to my previous point, everybody that gets on could possibly be from the Māori roll, or 13 could be, but 8 would be representing the general ward and 5 would be representing the Māori ward, because people from different roles can run on the different wards. So I actually think we leave the wording the same.
Well, it just
It's-
makes sense to stick to the original wording,
it's-
because Mr. Beatty
yeah.
has put a lot of thought into
Yes.
it.
But I think that we talk about it in terms of wards,
Okay,
because that's what we're voting, yeah.
1A, all in favour, contrary, carried. Okay, we're going to go to B. So now this is where the division comes in, Heather and Coral. So I am going to ask you to be in charge of this. The Gisborne district be voted into 2 wards consisting of a Tairāwhiti Māori ward, that's 1. So B1, Tairāwhiti Māori ward, represented by 5 councillors, comprising the whole area of the district as delineated, deposited with the local government commission as shown in attachment 2. All in favour? Oh, yes, you can't. What's that? So I'm only voting on B1. So I'm only voting on Māori wards now. Do you agree with Māori wards or not? So that is what I'm asking of councillors now. Do you vote for? Okay. So now we're going to go to B2. So this was unanimous voting for Tairāwhiti Māori ward, which will have 5 councillors. Thank you, councillors. B2, now we move into our general ward representation. The wording in our recommendation reads, Tairāwhiti General Ward represented by 8 councillors, comprising the area that is on our maps. Okay, so now you need to vote yes if you want at large, and no if you don't want at large. Is that clear for everyone? So I'm going to hand over to our very capable team to my left.
Councillor Akahata Brown. Aye. Councillor Burdett. No. Councillor Cranston. Aye. Councillor Dowsing. Aye. Councillor Hughes. No. Councillor Gregory. Yes. Councillor Faulkner. No. Councillor Foster. Yes. Councillor Robinson. Aye. Councillor Seymour. No. Councillor Sheldrake. Yes. Your Worship.
No.
Councillor Wharihinga.
No.
Councillor Worsnop. No. Casting vote.
Well, you know how I vote, so my casting vote is no.
So it's
Who
lost.
just said aye while I voted? Please do not do that. Okay, so it's not carried. So it's lost. So now we move into a space where Councillor Seymour have a second recommendation on the table.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was advised at morning tea that council officers have a supplementary paper just through you to the Chief Executive. I'm happy to move the alternative, but do we need to see what the supplementary paper is?
So why am I not aware of this?
I don't know.
Sorry,
but-
through the chair, this is just in relation to your now 1B2. You only need to worry about if the motion is to split the general ward into city and rural. It's option 3 that you've seen previously. I'm assuming that's the case if there's no change to the Māori ward.
So why is the city ward now called Turanganui?
Because that was the same as option 3 in the previous.
Okay, so
Can I speak to it then, Madam Chair? As
Right of
my
reply.
Right of reply. Just a couple of comments made by some of our colleagues earlier, and I, with the greatest respect to Councillor Sheldrake, I suspect that in that period when you worked on those rural farms that you talked about, we probably still had the Cook County and the Waikahu County and Gisborne City Council, and we did have representation across the district for a quite different structure. Madam Chair, I noted at the very beginning that I was happy to move item, well, it will be 1, 2, 3, it'll be a number 3, which is actually consistent with what is here under B, which is just being tabled for our presence. It is that type, and I was not of the mind to change the name to Turonganui City General Ward. So that seems to me we're going to open ourselves up for yet another debate. So Madam Chair, I was happy to call it Tairāwhiti General Ward, as we have in the paper in front of us. It is still Tairāwhiti. We would have Tairāwhiti Māori Ward, Tairāwhiti General Ward, and I would suggest, and it was what you seconded, that we had Tairāwhiti Rural Ward. And then the words come from here, represented by 2 councillors comprising the area of the district shown on the tabled attachment, the balance of the district. I just want to make one point that hasn't been made already in the summing up. We will have 5 councillors elected to represent Māori across the district, and I'm quite sure that some of those may, 1 or 2 of those may well come from the rural area, and I think councillors elected are mature enough to work with whoever else is elected. So where we've expressed concern about lack of representation, if there were to be only 2 rural ward councillors, and of course that's not many, I do believe that we rural councillors elected at the next council will work with their colleagues around the table, and very potentially there will be a Māori person or more than one elected across the district. So I don't think we should make a big thing about the fact it's only 2 and they can't possibly do the job. So Madam Chair, without dragging this on any further, I'm happy to move 2 and 3. The general ward represented by 6. I'm just making sure that's what this says. And I will change the name back to Tairāwhiti General Ward and Tairāwhiti Rural General Ward. Do we need to have rural general? Can I ask through the chair to our council advisors? It's a Tairāwhiti Rural Ward. Yes, I get that, but isn't okay? Thank you, Madam Chair. I've made my comments.
This is already a painful process, so I don't want to make it any longer, but I am. Turanganui means our city, so to me, the fact that that name is included there, maybe we should stick to what, so if it just makes sense to me, now that I've read through it, we've got a Tairāwhiti, which means Tairāwhiti is region-wide Māori ward. We've got a Turanganui, which is our city ward, and then we have got a Tairāwhiti Rural General Ward.
I'm happy to accept that, Madam Chair.
Okay. Okay, we're going to go through the same exercise, Heather. We've got a mover and a seconder.
I call for a division.
Yep, it's already been called.
Councillor Akahava Brown.
No.
Councillor Burdett. Yes. Councillor Cranston. No. Councillor Dowsing.
No.
Councillor Hughes. Yes. Councillor Gregory.
No.
Councillor Faulkner.
Yes.
Councillor Foster.
No.
Councillor Robinson.
No.
Councillor Seymour.
Yes.
Councillor Sheldrake.
No.
Councillor, oh, Your Worship.
Yes.
Councillor Wharihinga.
Aye.
Councillor Worsnop. Casting vote.
Yes. Carried. Thank you. Let's have a coffee. No, we've just had coffee. Thank you, James, for guiding us through this process. I know it was not straightforward. I do want to thank our staff. I do want to, I'm speaking. I do want to thank everyone that came and spoke to us. This sits close to people's hearts. Also, if we think about the changes we've made, and it ties back to my earlier speech, we've made a lot of changes in the last while, and changes we should be proud of, and we are on a journey. So I want to thank everyone, every councillor who voted today with their brains and their hearts, both count. I do want to thank James and Heather and your team. Nadine, you've put a lot of work into this. And I just want to this is not the final. We are now making a recommendation to the commission. So this is still maybe 80% of the process, James. We are getting there, but we need to take into account this is not the end of it. Our staff will still be doing a lot of work. Once our CEO has gone out to the public, has gone out to the commission, there's still a lot of work going into this. And then there's the potential of hearings, which will still happen. So thank you for your hard work. We're not at the end of the journey yet. Councillor Dowsing, you've had a question or a query or something.
Yes, I didn't want to disrupt the process and want to get the voting done, but I'm just going to expose a little bit of my ignorance here. I always thought it was Turanganui Kiwa or Turanga. I didn't know it was Turanganui. But it's...
Turanganui is the city. Turanganui Kiwa is the bay. The bay is Turanganui Kiwa.
Yeah, I thought it was Turanga, not Turanganui, but yeah.
Turanganui, it's correct. Okay, councillors, thank you for that, because what I want to do, I just want to make everyone aware, we've got a very quick paper in front of us, which will take 1 or 2 minutes. We're going to have that kōrero right now. All in favour?